Hello there. My name is Milburn Henry Otto Henke, and I was born on August the 24th of 1918. I was nicknamed Dink, or Dinky, after a 1940s cartoon. I was born on Lake Hook in McLeod County, Minnesota. My parents were German immigrants who broke the land on that farm. I had a brother, Eugene, and a sister, Beverly. In the 1930s, we moved into town in Hutchinson, and my parents opened a cafe on Main Street called Carl's Lunch, and later, Henke's Cafe. It was where the Hutch Cafe stands today. I was baptized and confirmed at Peace Lutheran Church in Hutchinson. I graduated from Hutchinson High School in 1936 and worked in the well drilling business, and later for my father at his cafe. On September the 21st, 1940, I enlisted in the National Guard. I was 22 years old. It was supposed to be 1-year training at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana, but it turned into 4 years, 11 months, and 5 days of service. Camp Claiborne was dismal, full of mud, boards, and tents, and we always had to be careful and shake out our sleeping bags, as snakes were numerous. On December the 7th, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and our regiment was sent to Camp Fort Baracus to guard the Florida coast. We were sent to a few other locations and then received our shots and were re-equipped. We were known as Company B, 135th Infantry Regiment, 34th Infantry Red Bull Division. We were known as foot soldiers, and to the people of Europe, we were the Doughboys or the Yanks. On January 14th, 1942, we boarded an English ship, the Strathaired, and we were quartered below deck and slept in the hammocks. The next day, that ship pulled out of the New York harbor, and we had our last look at the Statue of Liberty. Many of the fellows became seasick, but someone gave us a few loaves of bread and told us to eat it and lay down right away. It helped to ease our stomachs for the most part. We were then escorted by 6 American destroyers and a couple of battleships as far as Newfoundland, and then by 4 small but quick English ships. There was a brief run-in with a German submarine, and a few depth charges were thrown out by the English, which proved to cause a little bit of excitement. We entered Belfast, North Ireland Harbor on January the 26th, 1942. Our company was transferred to a large ferry boat, which brought us into the dock. As we were getting ready to unload, a few of us were sitting on a bunch of locker trunks and barrack bags. A colonel came up to our Lieutenant Springer and said, "I want an enlisted man." I happened to be sitting close to the lieutenant at that time, and he turned and said, "Henke, go with him." The first thing that I thought of was that this would be about unloading details. When I followed him as far as the gangplank, I figured out that this was something completely different. He asked me if I could talk to the reporters, and I said, "I can if I have to." General Hartle was waiting there, and he shook my hand and said, "Let's go." As I reached the end of the gangplank, they began playing the national anthem. We stopped, we saluted, and I stepped off the gangplank and shook hands with the Prime Minister and representatives of the British government. Many pictures were taken, including this one right here. A few days after my landing, I did a radio broadcast to the States, and I talked to my family and my girlfriend, Iola Christensen, the girl that the press liked to refer to as the girl he left behind. I would later go on to marry Iola. The next day, a reporter and a photographer followed me around as I did my training. They represented Look, Life, and British Illustrated magazines. We also went into town to take pictures with some of the local people, and because of that landing, I had the opportunity to be introduced to Eleanor Roosevelt at a Red Cross center, and she brought up the subject about what the GIs needed because of the cool English weather, and I mentioned that warm socks would be nice. We later received those. I also had the opportunity to meet with the Queen of England. A big deal was made of the fact that I was the first American soldier to land on foreign soil during World War II. But that was purely by chance. and I wanted people to know that I was just a symbol for all of the troops that fought in the war. We ended up leaving Liverpool for North Africa and arrived on January 3rd, 1943. Our regiment was the first group to go ashore, and many of us were wounded and killed. Some of the worst battles were Fonduque Pass, Hill 320, and Hill 609. It was on Hill 609 where Lieutenant Springer was wounded, and I crawled out of my foxhole under heavy fire to apply a tourniquet to his leg, using his knife and a piece torn from his jacket. Second Lieutenant Clawwater crawled out and assisted me in bringing the lieutenant back into his foxhole. Lieutenant Springer later died from his injuries in that same foxhole. A letter I received from his widow thanked us for trying to save his life and said that it helped her to know that he died in loving hands until the end. Second Lieutenant Clawwater and I were awarded the Silver Star for bravery under fire. It was on this hill and in this battle that many of our men were wounded or killed. The 34th Red Bull Division lost more men than any other division in the European conflict. In a letter I wrote home to my family, I wrote, "There is no glamour in war, and don't ever let those war movies at home make you think that there is. Every guy out there is scared stiff, and 9 out of 10 will admit it. The other guy is a liar. If your advance is pinned down by enemy fire, you dig a foxhole, and another, and another, and another, until you think you've dug up the whole of Africa, but you're glad to dig because your life depends on it. If you stay in that hole and get a heavy shelling, you begin to pray, and more sincere prayers never came than those from the boys in the foxholes. Boys that never knew what religion was, learned quick." In September of 1943, I was in a Jeep weapons carrier when it overturned, and the gun mount went across my back, breaking it. I ended up in a hospital in Casablanca. After 3 months, I could work, and I drove a car for the general and worked in a library. I left North Africa in July of 1944, arrived in New York, and then came by train to Glencoe, where I was greeted by my family and Iola. I was given a 30-day leave, and during that time, on August 20th of 1944, I married Iola, and we had a short honeymoon in northern Minnesota. I then returned to Fort Sam, Texas for reassignment. I was honorably discharged on August 25th, 1945. Iola and I were blessed with 3 children, Robert, Gary, and Patricia, and later with 4 grandchildren, Scott, Chris, Ryan, and Lindsay. When I got out of the service, I continued to make my living in the restaurant business, where I worked with my father for a while. I later opened a cafe in 1949 on the corner of Highway 7 and Main Street. I called it Henke's Hamburger Shop, and when the building was torn down, I bought Rico's Cafe and called it Henke's Cafe. In 1968, I tore that down and built a new cafe. Iola and I eventually retired from the restaurant business in September of 1980. I had the opportunity to visit Ireland several times as a civilian and a guest of the government in celebration of the 25th anniversary of the landing in 1967. I appeared on Ulster television, visited the dock we had landed at, and spoke at a luncheon with Parliament members. My other visit was in 1992 for the 50th anniversary of the landing of U.S. troops in Belfast. I helped to dedicate a statue honoring all U.S. troops that had landed that day back in 1942. I felt honored to be able to represent the United States and all of its soldiers. I was a lifetime member of Peace Lutheran Church, an active member of the American Legion Post 96, 40 and 8, the Hutchinson Veteran of Foreign Wars, Post 906, Military Order of the Cooties 65, and Disabled American Veterans. I enjoyed helping with the Special Olympics and helping with parties of people with special needs. I always liked visiting with the customers that came into my cafe, and I remained very patriotic, always flying my flag and taking part in the Memorial Day parade and services. My wife and I celebrated 53 years of marriage before I passed away at the Veterans Hospital from pancreatic cancer on April 26, 1998, at the age of 79.